Tonight we are going to spend some time with one of the most famous books in Buddhism, the Dhammapada. It is a collection of a few hundred sayings attributed to a prince who left his palace 25 centuries ago and spent the rest of his life teaching people how to find peace. His name was Siddhartha Gautama. The world came to call him the Buddha, which means the one who woke up. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you're listening from. The students of the Buddha memorized what he said. They carried his words by heart for centuries before anyone wrote them down. The book that eventually gathered those words is the Dhammapada. It means, roughly, the path of truth. Tonight we are not going to read from a single chapter. We are going to walk through the book itself, one doorway at a time. You do not need to know anything about Buddhism. The Buddha did not ask his students to believe. He asked them to try what he offered and see what was true in their own experience. Wherever you are, let yourself settle in. Let the shoulders come down. Thank you for joining us here at Midnight Monk. Let us begin. The Dhammapada opens with a verse that carries the weight of everything the Buddha would go on to teach for the rest of his life. It is only a few words long. The verse says this: "The mind is the forerunner of all things. What we experience is shaped by the mind, led by the mind, made by the mind. If a person speaks or acts from a troubled heart, suffering follows, the way a heavy cart follows the ox that pulls it. But if a person speaks or acts from a clear heart, peace follows, like a shadow that never departs. The cartwheel and the shadow, one for suffering, one for peace, and the same cause underneath both, the state of the heart." This is where the Dhammapada begins, with a simple observation about the human heart, that the quality of our inner life determines the quality of our outer experience far more than we usually believe. Most of us spend our lives working on circumstances. We try to arrange the outer world so that it will finally produce the feeling we are looking for. A better home, a different job, a quieter neighborhood, fewer difficulties, more comfort. We move through the years adjusting, improving, acquiring, believing that if we can just get the conditions right, peace will follow. And sometimes it does, briefly. We arrive at the place we were aiming for. The new house, the new position, the resolved argument. And for a day or two, something settles. The body relaxes. The mind grows quiet. We think, this is what peace feels like. This is what it took. But the settling rarely lasts. Within a week, the mind has found something new to arrange. Within a month, the peace that seemed to come from the new circumstance has faded, and we are working on the next thing. The mind does not stay settled for long, no matter how well the outer world has been organized. The Buddha noticed this. He had grown up in a palace. His father had given him every comfort a young man could want. Fine rooms, rich food, beautiful gardens, musicians and dancers. The elder Gautama had tried, with great love, to arrange the world so perfectly around his son that no suffering could reach him. It did not work. The prince was restless. Something in him was not at peace, and no arrangement of the outer world could touch it. He left the palace. He wandered for years. He tried the harshest forms of self-denial, starving himself nearly to death in the forest. That did not work either. Suffering could not be starved out of the mind any more than it could be pampered out. What he eventually found, sitting quietly under a tree on a spring night, was the teaching that opens the Dhammapada, that the mind is where a life is made, that suffering and peace both begin in the same place, and that the one thing any of us can truly tend is the quality of our own heart. There is a teaching from an Indian sage named Shantideva, who lived about 1,000 years after the Buddha, that puts this simply. He said, "Suppose you do not like stepping on thorns when you walk outside. You have two choices. You can try to cover the whole earth in leather, or you can make a sandal for your own foot." Most of us spend our lives trying to cover the earth. We try to remove every thorn, smooth every surface, arrange every encounter so that nothing sharp can reach us. And the earth, being the earth, keeps producing thorns. There is always one more difficulty, one more person who is hard to deal with, one more situation that needs to be fixed before we can rest. The sandal is different. The sandal does not change the earth. The thorns are still there. The rocks are still there. But the foot is protected. The person who has tended their own heart walks over the same rough ground as everyone else. They feel the ground beneath them. They simply do not bleed from every step. This is what the opening verse of the Dhammapada is pointing at. The decisive factor in any human life is not the arrangement of the outer world. It is the condition of the inner one. A person can live in a palace and be full of restlessness, unable to sleep, unable to enjoy what is right in front of them. A person can live in a small hut with very little and be entirely at ease. The Buddha's own life proved this. He had tried both. Neither the palace nor the forest gave him what he was looking for. What gave him peace was attending to the mind itself. There is a way of putting this simply. The key factor in whether a person is happy or unhappy is the inner attitude. The housing, the food, the job, all of these matter, but they are secondary. Someone in a wealthy household can be deeply troubled. Someone in a poor one can be full of warmth. The outer conditions shape a life, certainly, but they do not determine it. The heart determines it. This is a hard teaching to receive because most of us have built our lives on the opposite assumption. We have assumed that if we get the circumstances right, the peace will come. The verse is saying something different. It is saying that the peace comes first, that a heart at peace produces a peaceful life, and a heart in turmoil produces a turbulent one, regardless of what the outer world looks like. Let us explore a story about this. Long ago, in a kingdom at the edge of a wide river valley, there lived a ruler whose only son had fallen into a deep sadness. The young man had everything a person could ask for. Fine rooms, gardens that stretched to the riverbank, musicians who played in the evenings, food prepared by the finest cooks in the region. His father loved him and had given him everything within his power to give. But the son was not well. He sat by his window for hours, looking out at the valley. He did not eat much. He did not speak much. A heaviness had settled over him that no comfort could lift. The ruler called for the wisest people in his kingdom. Physicians, scholars, travelers who had seen distant lands. He asked them all the same question: "What is wrong with my son, and how can he be healed?" After many days of discussion, the wisest among them gave their answer. "You must find a man who is truly at peace," they said. "A man who is content through and through. When you find such a man, take the cloak from his shoulders and place it on your son. Only then will the heaviness lift." The ruler sent messengers in every direction. They searched the kingdom. They visited wealthy merchants, respected officials, celebrated scholars. Each one, when asked, said yes, he was content. But when pressed, each revealed some hidden worry. The merchant feared losing his fortune. The official envied the status of those above him. The scholar was bitter that his students did not listen. Every man who appeared content on the surface carried something restless underneath. Months passed. The messengers returned with nothing. The ruler grew desperate. His son was growing thinner. One evening, the ruler himself went walking alone along the river, far from the palace walls. The sun was going down. The fields were quiet. And from somewhere in the low hills, he heard singing. Not a grand song, a simple one. The kind of singing a person does when they have forgotten anyone might be listening. He followed the sound. In a clearing between two old trees, he found a young man sitting on the ground beside a small fire. The man was mending a fishing net. He was barefoot. His clothes were worn. He sang quietly as he worked, a tune with no words, just a slow and easy melody. The ruler watched him for a long time. He noticed something in the young man's face. An ease, a quiet brightness, the kind of expression that cannot be performed. He stepped into the clearing. The young man looked up and smiled. "Good evening," he said. "Good evening," said the ruler. "May I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you content?" The young man thought about it. "Yes," he said. "I think I am." "Truly content? You would not trade your life for another?" The young man laughed gently. "Trade it for what? I have my net. I have the river. I ate well today. The evening is warm. What would I trade for?" The ruler felt something open in his chest. He had found the man he was looking for. "I need your help," he said. "My son is ill." A deep sadness. The wise men say that if I bring him the cloak of a man who is truly at peace, the illness will lift. Will you give me your cloak? The young man looked at the ruler for a long time. His eyes were kind. "I would give it gladly," he said. "But look." He spread his arms. He wore no cloak. Beneath his worn shirt there was nothing but his own skin, brown from the sun. He owned no cloak. He had never needed one. The ruler did not speak. He looked at the young man. He looked at the fire, at the mended net, at the bare ground where the man slept. "How is it," the ruler finally said, "that you have nothing and are at peace, while my son has everything and cannot rest?" The young man considered this. He was not a philosopher. He was a fisherman. But he answered honestly. "Perhaps," he said, "it is because I am not waiting for anything to arrive. The river is here. The evening is here. The fire is warm. When I eat, I eat. When I sleep, I sleep. There is nothing between me and the life I have." The ruler stood in the clearing for a long time. The fire crackled. The river moved in the distance. The young man picked up his net and went back to his mending, humming his small tune. The ruler walked home slowly in the dark. He did not bring a cloak. He brought something else. A recognition he had not had before and could not quite put into words. That his son's sadness had not come from what was missing in the palace. It had come from something in the mind itself, something no cloak, no garment, no arrangement of the outer world could touch. His son did not recover overnight. But the ruler stopped searching for cures in the outer world. He began, instead, to sit with his son, to walk with him by the river, to speak less and listen more. And in time, slowly, something in the young man began to shift. Not because anything outside him had changed, because the quality of attention around him had. The ruler had spent months searching the world for something that could be placed on his son from the outside. A garment, a covering, a thing to wrap around the sadness. What he found, in the end, was a man who needed no covering at all. The man by the river was at peace, not because of what he had, but because of what he did not need. There was nothing between him and his life. No waiting, no reaching, no gap between where he was and where he thought he should be. The Buddha would have recognized the fisherman. He had known men like him. He had also known the ruler and the ruler's son, because he had been both. He had been the young man in the palace, surrounded by everything, unable to rest. And he had been the man by the river, finally at ease, not because the world had been arranged, but because the heart had settled. This is the first teaching the Dhammapada offers, that the mind is the forerunner, that the quality of a life is woven on the loom of the heart, not assembled from the materials of the world. The verse does not say that the outer world is unimportant. Food matters, shelter matters, safety matters. But the verse is clear. Once the basic needs of a life have been met, the difference between a person at peace and a person in turmoil is not what surrounds them. It is what is inside them. The Buddha said it with two images, the cartwheel and the shadow. A troubled heart drags suffering behind it wherever it goes, the way a cart follows the ox. A clear heart carries peace with it, wherever it goes, the way a shadow follows a body in the sun. The cart and the shadow do not choose where they go. They follow the thing that leads them. The thing that leads, always, is the mind. The whole Dhammapada is built on this. Every chapter that follows, every verse on love, on patience, on anger, on the quiet steadiness of a well-tended life, rests on this single recognition. That peace is not a place we arrive at. It is a way the heart learns to travel. Tonight, the practice is simply to notice where peace has been placed. Most of us carry an unspoken belief that peace lives somewhere we have not yet arrived. In the next accomplishment, in the next resolution, in some future version of our life where the difficulties have been cleared away. The verse is offering a gentler possibility. That peace may not live in the destination. It may live in the quality of the step. Wherever you are right now, in this bed, in this room, with whatever the day has brought, the heart is still the forerunner. The circumstances are what they are. But the way you meet them, the quality of attention you bring to this moment, this breath, this quiet hour, that is where the peace is made. You do not have to fix the day. You do not have to resolve anything before sleep. You can simply let the heart settle, the way water settles when it has not been stirred. The clarity was always there. It just needed a moment of stillness to show itself. Take a breath. Let the body be where it is. And when you are ready, we will continue together. There is a pair of verses in the twin chapter that uses the oldest image in the world for shelter. A roof. rain, and what happens to each, depending on the care that has been taken. The verses say this: as rain leaks through a badly thatched roof, craving and restlessness leak into a heart that has not been tended. And as rain cannot enter a house whose roof is well thatched, neither can craving enter a heart that has been carefully looked after. It is a plain image. Anyone can see it. A roof with gaps lets the rain in. A roof without gaps keeps the rain out. The quality of the shelter depends on the quality of the work done before the storm arrives. The Buddha used this image because everyone he was speaking to knew exactly what it meant. In the villages of ancient India, thatching a roof was one of the most important tasks of the dry season. A family that neglected its roof would suffer when the monsoon came. A family that took the time, reed by reed, to lay the thatch carefully and close every gap would sit dry and warm while the rain poured down around them. The teaching is about the heart, but it arrives through the hands, through the quiet, ordinary, unhurried work of tending something before it is tested. In many Asian languages, the word for mind and the word for heart are the same. There is no split between thinking and feeling, between the head and the chest. When the Buddha spoke of tending the mind, he was speaking of tending the whole being. The thoughts and the emotions, the way we reason and the way we love, the way we plan our days and the way we lie awake at night. This matters because in much of the West, we have learned to separate these things. We speak of the mind as something that thinks and the heart as something that feels, as if they live in different rooms. The Buddha did not divide them. He saw the inner life as one dwelling, one house, with one roof. When the roof is sound, everything underneath it is protected. The thinking, the feeling, the remembering, the resting, all of it stays dry. The forces that come through a badly tended roof are the ones the Buddha named throughout his teaching: greed, fear, anger, envy, restlessness. These are the rains. They arrive in every life. They are not personal punishments. They are weather. The question is whether the roof has been tended. This is a gentler way of thinking about inner work than many of us were taught. We are often told that working on ourselves means fighting something, fighting bad habits, fighting negative thoughts, fighting the parts of ourselves we do not like. The image of the roof suggests something different. The thatcher does not fight the rain. The thatcher simply tends the roof. The rain can do whatever it wants. It is the roof that matters. Let us explore a story about this. In a village along a river that flooded every year with the rains, there lived an old woman who was known for one thing. Her house never leaked. It was a small house. Mud walls, like every other house in the village. A wooden frame. A thatched roof of river grass and palm fronds, layered and bound in the old way. There was nothing remarkable about its materials. Every house in the village was built from the same things. But every year, when the heavy rains came and the river rose, the same thing happened. Some houses leaked. Some leaked badly. Buckets were set out. Bedding was moved. Families huddled in the dry corners, waiting for the weather to pass. And the old woman's house, at the far end of the village, stayed dry. People noticed this. They sometimes asked her about it. She did not have much to say. "I tend the roof," she would answer. That was all. A younger woman in the village, perhaps 30, whose own house leaked every year in the same place above the cooking fire, decided one spring to watch the old woman and learn what she did differently. She visited the old woman in the dry season, when the sky was clear and the rains were still months away. She found her on a low ladder beside her house, working on the roof. The old woman had a bundle of fresh river grass in one hand and a short bone needle in the other. She was threading new grass into a section of the thatch, replacing old reeds that had gone brittle. "You are fixing the roof already?" the younger woman said. "The rains are not for 3 months. That is why I am fixing it now," the old woman said. She climbed down from the ladder. She invited the younger woman to sit with her in the shade. She poured water from a clay jar. "May I ask you something?" the younger woman said. "Of course. My house leaks every year in the same spot. I have patched it many times, but when the rains come, the water finds its way through again. What am I doing wrong?" The old woman thought about this. "When do you patch it?" she asked. "When it leaks," the younger woman said. "During the rains, when I can see where the water is coming in." The old woman nodded. "That is the trouble," she said. "By the time you can see the leak, the water has already been working its way through the thatch for days. It has softened the reeds. It has found the channels between them. Patching a roof in the rain is like bailing a boat with a hole in it. You can keep up for a while, but the water is patient." She gestured toward her own roof. "I do the work in the dry season," she said, "when the roof does not need to be fixed. I climb up when the sun is out and the reeds are dry. I feel along the thatch with my hands. I look for the places where the binding has loosened, where a reed has shifted, where a small gap has opened that I cannot see from inside the house. I replace those reeds. I tighten the binding. I close the gaps before the rain knows they are there." The younger woman looked up at the old woman's roof. It looked the same as any other roof in the village. "How long does it take?" she asked. "A little while, every few weeks, through the dry season," the old woman said. "It is not hard work. It is just steady work. A few reeds here, a few reeds there. By the time the rains come, there is nothing for the water to find." The younger woman thanked her and went home. That afternoon, she climbed up to her own roof with a bundle of fresh grass and began, for the first time, to tend it in the dry weather. Her house still leaked that year. She had started too late. But the following year, having worked on the roof through the entire dry season, she sat through the heaviest rains the village had seen in a decade and did not set out a single bucket. The old woman was teaching the younger one something the Buddha himself pointed at, that the time to tend the inner life is not when the storm is already here. It is in the quiet days, the ordinary days, the days when nothing seems to need fixing. This is a practical teaching. Most of us wait for the crisis before we turn our attention inward. We wait until we cannot sleep. We wait until the anxiety has become unbearable. We wait until the grief has already flooded the house. And then we try to patch the roof in the rain. The Buddha was suggesting something different. Tend the roof now, in the dry season, in the ordinary hours of an ordinary day. The work is small. A few minutes of quiet attention. A few moments of noticing what is happening inside before it has become a storm. The reeds that need replacing are the small habits of the heart. The way we speak to ourselves when we are tired. the way we respond to small frustrations, the way we carry the day's weight into the evening. These are small things. They do not seem urgent. But each one is a reed in the thatch, and when enough of them have loosened, the rain comes through. There is another story from the mountain country. In a mountain town where the winters were long and the winds came down hard from the peaks, there was a carpenter who was known for building the warmest houses in the region. People came to him from other towns. They wanted to know his method. They assumed he had some special technique, some material the other builders did not use. He did not. He used the same wood, the same stone, the same clay as everyone else. His houses were warm because of where he put his attention. One autumn, a young builder from the valley came to work with him for a season. The young man was talented. He could raise a frame quickly. He could fit joints cleanly. He was proud of how fast he could work. On his first day, the carpenter set him to a task that confused him. He asked the young builder to walk slowly around a finished house, one that had been standing for several years, and to press his hand against every joint in the wall, every place where one board met another, every place where the frame met the foundation, every corner, every edge. "What am I looking for?" the young builder asked. "Air," the carpenter said. "Put your hand flat against the joint. If you feel the smallest movement of air, mark it with chalk." The young builder walked the house. It took him most of the morning. He found 11 places where he could feel air moving through the joint. 11 small gaps, none of them visible to the eye, all of them letting the cold in. The carpenter spent the afternoon sealing them. He mixed a paste of clay and straw and pressed it into each gap with his thumb, smoothing it flat, letting it dry. It was slow, quiet work. The young builder watched. "This is what you do?" he said. "This is the secret?" "This is most of what I do," the carpenter said. "The building is the easy part. Anyone can raise a house. The warmth comes from the tending, from finding the gaps before winter finds them." He pressed his thumb into the last joint and smoothed the clay. "A house is only as warm as its weakest seam," he said. "You can build strong walls and a solid roof. You can use the finest wood. But if there is a gap the width of a finger where the wind can enter, the whole house will be cold. The wind does not care how strong the walls are. It only needs one opening." The young builder worked with the carpenter through the winter. He learned to slow down. He learned to walk a finished house the way the carpenter did, with his hand against every seam, listening with his fingers for the small movements of air that meant the cold would find its way in. He learned that the work of building was less important than the work of tending, that a house could be raised in weeks and kept warm for decades if someone was willing to walk its walls, season after season, and close the gaps before they grew. When he returned to the valley in the spring, he built differently than before. He built more slowly. He spent more time on the joins, and the houses he built were warmer than anything the valley had known. The carpenter had spent his life learning that warmth is not built in a single effort. It is maintained. It is walked and re-walked, season after season, with a patient hand against the seams. The grand structure matters less than the small attention given to where things meet. The Buddha used the image of the roof because it placed the work of peace exactly where it belongs. In the daily, the ordinary, the unglamorous. The carpenter does not build warmth with a grand gesture. He builds it with his thumb in a gap, and the gap, closed before winter, saves the whole house. This is what the Buddhist tradition means by practice. The word can sound formal, as if it requires a special room, a special posture, a special hour. But the Dhammapada is pointing at something closer to the carpenter's walk around the house. The daily tending of the inner life. The noticing of small gaps before they become large ones. The willingness to do the work now, when the sky is clear and there is no urgency, so that when the weather comes, the house holds. The Buddha once said that just as the great ocean has one taste, the taste of salt, his teaching has one taste, the taste of freedom. The freedom he was pointing at is the freedom of a house that does not leak. The freedom of a heart that has been tended, quietly, steadily, so that when the world's weather arrives, there is a dry place inside to rest. Tonight, the roof is already over you. The bed is the dry place. The room is the shelter. Whatever rains have come today, whatever worries or frustrations or old weathers have blown through, they are outside now. The house of this hour is sound. If something is leaking through, some thought that keeps returning, some worry that keeps finding its way in, you do not have to patch it tonight. You can simply notice where the drip is. You can make a small mental note. That seam needs tending. And then, in the dry season, in some quiet morning when the sky is clear, you can climb up and close the gap. For now, the rain is falling outside. You are inside. The roof holds. Rest here for a moment. Notice the warmth of the shelter around you. When you feel ready, we will step through the next doorway together. Many people carry a quiet weariness about being told what to believe. They have been handed doctrines, given rules, asked to accept things they could not test. Somewhere along the way, the invitation to explore became a demand to agree. And something in them, honestly, grew tired. The Dhammapada meets this weariness with a different kind of offer. One of its verses, shared across every school of Buddhism and recited in temples across Asia for centuries, holds the whole teaching in a few words. The verse says this: avoid what harms, cultivate what is good, purify your own heart. This is the teaching of all the awakened ones. The verse sounds simple. Avoid what harms, cultivate what is good, tend the heart. But the verse is an instruction to do something, not to believe something. It points at the practical, at the slow, daily work of paying attention to what moves through us and choosing, as best we can, to feed what helps and starve what hurts. The Buddha was not offering a system. He was offering something closer to a trade. The way a gardener learns soil or a carpenter learns wood. Something learned by doing, tested in ordinary life, adjusted along the way. Something a person could try tonight and know by morning whether it helped. In the Buddhist tradition, the Buddha is often compared to a physician. The comparison comes from the teaching itself. The tradition says that the Buddha had 84,000 remedies, each one suited to a different person, a different temperament, a different kind of suffering. He did not give the same medicine to everyone. He looked at the person in front of him and offered what that person needed. This is unusual. Most teachings present one truth and ask everyone to accept it. The Buddha did something different. He taught differently depending on who was listening. To a grieving mother, he spoke of impermanence. To a proud scholar, he spoke of humility. To a fearful student, he spoke of courage. The teaching changed its shape to meet the student, the way water changes its shape to fill whatever vessel holds it. The real essence of Buddhism, as many teachers have described it, is about purifying the heart of the forces that create suffering. Forces like greed, fear, hatred, envy. That is the work to be accomplished. And the ways of doing that work are many. Some people find their way through devotion. Some through sitting quietly. Some through service to others. Some through careful study. The tradition has always allowed for this. The door does not matter. What matters is that the person walks through it. And because the door does not matter, the question of whether Americans or Europeans or anyone outside of Asia can follow this path has a simple answer. The path does not belong to any country or culture. It belongs to anyone with a mind to tend. As the Buddha himself put it, we all have the same mind and the same qualities in it that lead to either happiness or suffering. The work is the same everywhere. Only the setting changes. The word Buddha itself tells us something about this. It simply means one who woke up. The Buddha was a human being who saw something clearly and spent the rest of his life helping others see it too. The title is a description, not a rank. And in the Buddhist understanding, the capacity to wake up is in everyone. It is not reserved for special people or special times. It is the natural possibility of every human mind. There is another verse in the opening chapter that sharpens this teaching. It says, "One who recites many teachings but does not live them is like a cowherd counting someone else's cattle, and one who knows only a few teachings but walks them fully shares in the life of the awakened." This is a direct verse. It draws a line between knowing and living, between holding wisdom in the mind and carrying it in the body. The cowherd spends his day with the cattle. He counts them. He knows their number. But at the end of the day, none of them are his. He goes home with nothing. The person who has read every book on peace but cannot sit quietly for 10 minutes is the cowherd. The person who has memorized every teaching on kindness but cannot be patient with the person standing in front of them is the cowherd. Knowledge held at arm's length, admired but never tested, is someone else's cattle. The verse is not against learning. The Buddha valued study. He encouraged his students to listen carefully, to ask questions, to examine what they were told. But he also knew that study without practice was like a menu without a meal. You could read about food all day. It would not feed you. An old story from the river country tells of this. Long ago, in a region where a wide river separated two provinces, a traveler was making his way home after many years of study. He was a learned man. He had spent the better part of a decade at the great schools, reading the classics, debating philosophy, memorizing texts that lesser scholars could barely understand. He was proud of what he knew. He had earned the right to be. He arrived at the riverbank late in the afternoon and hired a ferryman to take him across. The ferryman was an older woman, perhaps 60, with sun-darkened hands and a quiet manner. She worked the oar with an easy rhythm, guiding the flat-bottomed boat into the current. The traveler, who had been alone on the road for several days and was glad of company, began to talk. He spoke about the texts he had studied, the philosophies he had mastered, the arguments he had won at the school. He spoke well. He enjoyed the sound of his own learning. After a while, he turned to the ferryman. "Tell me," he said, "have you studied the classical texts?" "No," she said, "I have not." "Have you read the great philosophers?" "No." The traveler shook his head with genuine pity. "You have spent your life on this river, and you have not read a single book of philosophy. That is a great deal of life unlived." The ferryman said nothing. She kept working the oar. The sky, which had been clear, began to change. A dark line of cloud appeared to the west. The wind picked up. The surface of the river, which had been smooth, began to chop and roughen. Within minutes, the boat was rocking hard. Water splashed over the sides. The traveler gripped the edge of the boat. He had turned pale. His scrolls, carefully wrapped in oilskin, slid across the floor of the boat. He grabbed for them with one hand, nearly losing his balance. The ferryman looked at him steadily. "Leave the scrolls," she said. "Hold on to the side. Keep your weight low. The current will push us toward the shallows if I can keep the bow pointed right." She worked the oar with a calm that the traveler could not understand. The storm was loud. The river was rough. But the ferryman's hands were steady. She read the water the way the scholar read his books, with long practice and deep familiarity. She knew where the currents ran. She knew where the rocks were. She knew, without being told, how the wind would push the boat and when the river would try to turn them broadside. The traveler watched her. He had studied the movements of stars and the arguments of ancient sages. He had never studied anything as closely as he studied the ferryman's hands in those minutes. There was no hesitation in them, no uncertainty. She was not thinking about what to do. She was doing it the way the river itself was doing what rivers do. After 20 minutes, the storm began to ease. The ferryman brought the boat to the far bank and tied it to a post. The traveler climbed out on shaking legs. His scrolls were wet but safe. He stood on the bank for a long time, looking at the river and then at the ferryman, who was calmly bailing water from the bottom of the boat. "Thank you," he said, finally. "You are welcome," she said. He walked the rest of the way home in silence. He did not speak about his studies for a long time after that. The ferryman knew something the scholar did not. She knew the river. She knew it in her hands, in her shoulders, in the instinct that told her where to point the bow when the storm came. Her knowledge was lived knowledge. It had been tested, many times, in conditions that did not care how many books she had read. The Buddha was pointing at this same difference. The teachings he offered were meant to be lived. They were meant to be taken into the body, into the daily hours, into the small, ordinary moments where peace is actually made or lost. A teaching that lives only in the mind, however beautiful, has not yet done its work. This is why the Buddha compared his teaching to a raft. He said, when you need to cross a river, you build a raft. You use it. You are grateful for it. But when you reach the other shore, you do not strap the raft to your back and carry it for the rest of your life. You set it down. The teaching is the raft. The crossing is what matters. Let us explore another story. In a mountain village, there lived a healer who was known throughout the province. People came from many days' travel to see her. She had a small house with a garden of medicinal plants, and she saw patients one at a time, from early morning until the light faded. A young man who wanted to become a healer himself came to study with her. He arrived expecting to learn her system. He had heard she had a particular method, a specific way of diagnosing illness, a set of remedies she always used. On his first morning, he sat beside her as she saw a farmer who had been unable to sleep for many weeks. She listened to the farmer for a long time. She asked about his work, his family, his appetite. Then she gave him a small bundle of dried herbs and told him to make a tea from them each evening. The next patient was an older woman with pain in her joints. The healer listened again, asked different questions, examined the woman's hands. She gave her a salve made from a different set of plants and told her to walk each morning in the cool air before the sun was high. The third patient was a young mother who was anxious and could not eat. The healer spoke with her softly for nearly an hour. She gave her no herbs at all. She simply told her to come back in a week and to spend a few minutes each day sitting quietly in the garden while her child played. By the end of the first day, the young student was confused. "You gave 3 different treatments," he said. 3 different methods. How will I learn your system if it changes with every patient?" The healer looked at him. "That is the system," she said. "The illness is different in every person. The remedy has to match the person, not the other way around. If I gave every patient the same herb, I would help some and harm others. But how do I learn what to give each person? By paying attention," she said. "By looking at the person in front of you instead of at a chart on the wall. The chart is useful, but the person is what matters." The young man stayed with the healer for several years. He learned a great deal about plants and remedies. But the most important thing he learned was this, that the healing was never in the remedy itself. It was in the match between the remedy and the person. And the only way to find that match was to look, each time, with fresh eyes. The healer was practicing what the Buddha taught, that the path is not a single road but a living response to the person walking it. There is no formula that works for everyone. There is only the careful attention to what this person, in this moment, actually needs. Part of why the Dhammapada has lasted so long is this. It does not tell its readers what to believe. It tells them to look, to pay attention, to try the teachings in their own experience and see what happens. The Buddha once told his students, "Do not accept what I say simply because I said it. Test it. Try it. See if it works in your own life. If it does, keep it. If it does not, set it down." This kind of trust in the listener is rare in any tradition. It places the responsibility exactly where peace is actually built, in the heart of the person doing the work. Tonight, there is nothing to believe and nothing to memorize. The Dhammapada has offered a few lines. Avoid what harms. Cultivate what is good. Tend the heart. These are not commandments. They are invitations. They can be tried tomorrow morning, in the first conversation of the day, in the first small choice between patience and impatience. And if they prove useful, they can be tried again. And if they do not, they can be set down, the way the Buddha said a raft should be set down once the crossing has been made. The path is walked, one step at a time, in ordinary shoes, on ordinary ground. There is nothing else to do tonight. Take a slow breath. Let the body settle a little deeper. And whenever you are ready, we will walk on. question visits most people at some point. It arrives, usually, in the middle of an honest moment. The question is this: if peace comes from turning inward, from tending the heart, from quieting the mind, then what about the world? The world is full of suffering. People are hungry. People are in pain. Is sitting quietly in a room, tending one's own peace, a form of turning away? The question is an old one. It was asked of the Buddha. It has been asked of every contemplative tradition that has ever existed. And the answer the Buddhist tradition gives uses a single image. The teaching describes a bird with two wings. One wing is wisdom. The other is compassion. The bird needs both to fly. A bird beating only the wing of wisdom, only the inward work, will fly in circles. A bird beating only the wing of compassion, only the outward work, will also fly in circles. The flight requires both. There is a verse in the Dhammapada that touches this. It says, "Secure your own good first, then give yourself fully to the good of others." The order matters. The verse is making a practical observation about where the work begins. A person who has not tended their own heart will bring that untended heart into every act of service. The doctor who is burned out treats patients differently than the doctor who has rested. The parent who has not slept in days responds to the child differently than the parent who is settled and present. The friend who is full of their own unprocessed anger gives different advice than the friend who has sat with their anger and let it pass. The verse is saying something simple. The quality of what you give to others depends on the quality of what you have cultivated in yourself. A lamp that has not been filled cannot light a room. The filling comes first. The lighting follows naturally. In the Buddhist tradition, this is something teachers have observed again and again over centuries. As a person grows quieter inside, as the self-centeredness that most of us carry begins to loosen its grip, a natural feeling of connection with others begins to grow. It does not have to be forced or instructed. It simply arises, the way warmth arises from a fire that has been properly tended. Here, the Buddhist path reverses what most of us expect. We tend to think that connection with others grows through effort, through going out, through joining things and attending things and being present in the world. The Buddha observed that it also grows through going in, through sitting still, through tending the mind. As the self quiets, connection arises on its own. The two are not in competition. They are partners. The Buddha described this rhythm many times. The practice of turning inward and the practice of turning outward are the in-breath and the out-breath of a single life. There are seasons of going inward, seasons of solitude and quiet tending. And there are seasons of going outward, of giving, of serving, of bringing what has been gathered in the quiet into the noise of the world. This question has been put to Buddhist teachers in every generation. Does a path so focused on inner states come into conflict with the desire to improve the world, to feed the hungry, to address suffering outside the monastery walls? The answer the tradition gives is consistent. As we grow in wisdom through the inner work, the natural outcome is compassionate action in the world. And there is no hierarchy of compassionate action. A person who tends a sick neighbor is doing the same work as a person who leads a march for peace. The scale does not matter. What matters is that the action arises from a clear heart. This rhythm shaped entire societies in parts of Southeast Asia. Villages would arrive at the monastery at dawn, sometimes hundreds of people walking in the early light with bowls of rice, with fruit, with whatever they could offer. Everything was given freely. There was no charge, no transaction. The monks received the food. The villagers received something harder to name. A presence. A quietness. The sense that someone nearby was tending the inner life carefully, and that the care was spreading outward in ways no one had to organize. The monks did not set out to change the world. They set out to tend the heart. And the tending, done honestly, became a kind of service that no one had to plan. The generosity flowed in both directions. The villagers fed the monks. The monks, through the quality of their attention and the steadiness of their presence, fed something in the village that food alone could not reach. The two wings, look like this, lived out across centuries, in real communities, between real people. The inward turn and the outward gift, breathing together, sustaining each other, neither one complete on its own. Let us explore a story about this. In a mountain valley, long ago, there lived a hermit in a small hut at the edge of a forest. He had been there for many years. His hut had very little in it. A sleeping mat, a clay bowl, a water jar, a few warm clothes. He spent his days in quiet practice, and in the evenings he would sit outside and watch the sky darken over the trees. One night, while the hermit was away gathering water from the stream, a thief crept into the hut. He searched every corner. He turned over the mat. He looked behind the water jar. There was nothing to take. The hut held nothing of value. The hermit returned while the thief was still inside. He set down his water jar in the doorway. The thief froze, expecting anger or alarm. The hermit looked at him for a moment. He noticed the man's thin clothing, the dust on his feet, the exhaustion on his face. Then he spoke. "You have come a long way," he said, gently, "and you should not leave with nothing. Here, take my robe." He slipped the robe from his shoulders and held it out. The thief stared at him. He did not understand. He had been caught, and the person who caught him was offering a gift. He opened his mouth to say something, but no words came. He took the robe and left, quickly, without speaking. The hermit sat down outside his hut. The night was clear. The moon was full, hanging low over the trees, so bright that the path to the stream was lit in silver. He looked up at it for a long time. "I wish," he said quietly, to no one, "I could have given him the moon." The hermit did not resent the thief. He did not feel robbed. He felt sorry for a man who had walked a long way in the dark and found nothing. His first response was generosity, and his second was regret that he could not give more. This kind of response does not come from willpower. It comes from a heart that has been tended for a long time. The hermit had spent years in that small hut, doing the quiet work of the inner life. By the time the thief arrived, the compassion was not something the hermit had to summon. It was simply what was there. The way water is what is there when you reach the bottom of a well. And the hermit's wish, sitting naked under the moon, is perhaps the purest expression of the two wings in a single moment. He had spent his life cultivating inner quiet. And when a stranger arrived in need, the quiet had become so deep that it overflowed into a generosity that did not even pause to think. The wisdom wing and the compassion wing, beating together, so naturally that the hermit did not experience them as two things at all. A second story, told in many parts of the world, comes at this from a different side. There is an old tale, told in many parts of the world, from West Africa to the Middle East to the villages of Eastern Europe, about two travelers and a wise man at the edge of a village. The first traveler came down the road one afternoon, tired and dusty. He saw the wise man sitting under a tree near the village entrance and stopped. "Tell me," the traveler said, "what kind of people live in this village? I am thinking of settling here." The wise man looked at him. "What kind of people lived in the village you have come from?" he asked. The traveler scowled. They were terrible, dishonest, unfriendly, selfish, everyone looking out for themselves. I could not wait to leave. The wise man nodded slowly. "I am sorry to tell you," he said, "you will find the same kind of people here." The traveler cursed under his breath and walked on, his shoulders tight, his face hard. Some time later, a second traveler came along the same road. She too was dusty from walking, and she too stopped when she saw the wise man under the tree. "Tell me," she said, "what kind of people live in this village? What kind of people lived in the village you have come from?" The wise man asked again. The second traveler smiled. "They were wonderful, generous, kind, always willing to help a stranger. I was sorry to leave them." The wise man smiled too. "You will find the same kind of people here," he said. She thanked him and walked into the village. Within an hour, she had been invited to share a meal by a family near the well. The wise man was making a plain observation about how the heart shapes what it meets. The first traveler, carrying bitterness, would find bitterness wherever he went. The second, carrying warmth, would find warmth. The village was the same village. The road was the same road. The difference was in what each traveler brought to it. This is the deeper teaching inside the two wings image. The inner work does not just prepare us to serve the world. It changes what world we see when we look. A heart full of resentment meets resentful people everywhere. A heart that has been tended meets kindness, even in difficult places, because the tended heart knows how to recognize it and draw it out. The Buddha taught that this was the real reason the inner work matters. The calmed heart changes the quality of every encounter, every conversation, every meeting, every moment of contact between one person and another. The world we experience is, in part, the world our hearts have prepared us to see. The question that started this module, whether seeking peace is selfish while the world suffers, has an old answer in the Buddhist tradition. The answer is, look at what actually happens when someone tends the heart well. The benefit does not stay inside. It cannot. A heart that has been made peaceful becomes a source of peace for everyone it touches. The hermit giving his robe, the traveler who finds kindness wherever she goes, the monk sitting quietly while the village brings rice at dawn. In each case, the inner work and the outer benefit are not separate things. They are the same gesture, seen from two sides. Shantideva, the Indian sage whose teaching on the sandal we heard earlier tonight, once wrote that the wish to free all beings from suffering is what turns ordinary effort into something larger. The two wings, in his understanding, are joined at the body. You cannot separate them without grounding the bird. The person who meditates for years without any concern for others has only one wing. The person who serves the world endlessly without ever tending their own heart also has only one wing. The flight requires both, moving together, in the rhythm that a life naturally finds when it is honest about both its needs and its gifts. The bird flies when both wings are moving. The life opens when both the inner tending and the outer giving are allowed to take their natural rhythm. In and out, quiet and service, filling the lamp and letting the room grow bright. Tonight, there is nothing to decide about the balance between inner and outer. The work of this hour is simple. Rest. The lamp is being filled right now, in the quiet, in the lying down, in the breathing. Whatever is gathered in these hours will move outward tomorrow, naturally, in the first kind word, the first patient gesture, the first moment of presence offered to another person without effort. The filling happens now. The giving happens later. Both are part of the same motion. Settle here. Let the breath grow slow. When you are ready, we will go on together. Picture a shelf of books about peace. Dozens of them, collected over years. Each one was bought with hope. Some were read fully, some halfway, some only opened once. The shelf is heavy with wisdom, and the person who owns the shelf still lies awake at night. The Dhammapada speaks to this directly. One of its verses says, "Better than 1,000 hollow sayings is one line that brings the hearer peace." And another verse nearby says, "Better one day lived with full awareness than 100 years lived without waking up." The Buddha had nothing against learning. He valued study. He encouraged his students to listen carefully and to remember what they heard. But he had also watched, over many years, what happened to people who collected teachings the way some people collect beautiful objects. They had many. They could display them. They could recite them. But the teachings had not entered their lives. The words had stayed on the surface, admired but untested, like coins that had never been spent. The verse is pointing at something simple. One line, truly taken in, truly lived with through the hours of an ordinary day, does more for a person than a library of wisdom that stays on the shelf. In some Buddhist communities, there is a practice that takes this verse seriously. A student will choose a single line from the teachings, often just a few words, and carry it through a day. She might write it out in the morning. She might return to it at midday. She might sit with it again in the evening, asking herself how the day looked when seen through the lens of those few words. The Zen teacher Yvonne Rand once described this practice plainly. She spoke of students who would take a single passage from the Dhammapada and use it as a kind of companion. They would write it out each day, recite it quietly 5 or 6 times during the day's hours, and let the verse work on them. The point was not to analyze the line or to master it. The point was to let it accompany the day, the way a key sits in a pocket. You do not think about the key all morning, but it is there. And when the right door appears, the hand reaches for it. There is a reason short sayings survive for centuries while long speeches are forgotten. A short saying can be carried. It fits in the mind the way a stone fits in a pocket. It can travel with a person through the noise of the market, through the long hours of work, through the difficult conversation, through the sleepless night. It is always available because it is always small enough to hold. The great scriptures of the world are long. The Dhammapada itself has 423 verses. The Buddhist canon runs to thousands of pages. but the verses that have actually changed people's lives over and over across centuries have almost always been short ones. A few words, a single image, something that could be written on a piece of paper and pinned to a wall, and that could do its work from there. The old tales carry this teaching too. Long ago, a young man left his home to travel and learn. He was the son of a prosperous family, but he had spent his youth carelessly, paying little attention to his father's advice. Now grown, he saw that his father had been right, and he set out to find wisdom on his own. He traveled for many weeks. One afternoon, in open country, he came upon an old farmer working in a field. The young man stopped to rest, and they began to talk. The farmer asked where he was going, and the young man said he was looking for wisdom. The farmer leaned on his hoe. "I can sell you a piece of wisdom," he said. "1 gold coin for 1 piece." The young man laughed. He had expected wisdom to come from a scholar in a great hall, not from a farmer in a field. But something in the old man's face made him take the offer seriously. "What is it?" he asked. "First the coin," said the farmer. The young man paid. The farmer said, "Still water sees clearly. Muddy water sees nothing." The young man waited. He expected more. The farmer went back to his hoeing. "That is all?" the young man said. "That is all," said the farmer. "1 coin, 1 piece of wisdom. You may buy another if you like." The young man shook his head. He thanked the farmer and walked on. He thought the old man had cheated him. The advice was so plain it felt empty. Still water sees clearly. Muddy water sees nothing. What kind of wisdom was that? He carried the words anyway. They sat in his mind the way a pebble sits in a shoe, impossible to forget, not quite possible to dismiss. Many months later, the young man was far from home, staying as a guest in a house in a distant province. In the middle of the night, he was awakened by shouting. The host was standing in the doorway of his room, holding a lamp. There had been a death in the house. An older guest, sleeping in the next room, had been found lifeless. The household was in an uproar. Suspicion fell on the young man, who was a stranger and had arrived only the day before. The host's family was ready to seize him. The young man's heart was pounding. Every part of him wanted to run, to bolt through the window and disappear into the dark. But the farmer's words rose up in him, the way the Zen teacher described a verse, rising up without being summoned. Still water sees clearly. Muddy water sees nothing. He did not understand why the words came to him in that moment. But he stopped. He did not run. Instead, he asked the host, quietly, to look more carefully at the older guest's body. He asked whether a physician had been called. He asked what the man had eaten, what he had drunk, whether he had complained of illness during the evening. The host, taken aback by the young man's calmness, paused. A physician was sent for. The physician came, examined the body, and found that the man had died of a long-standing illness of the heart. There had been no crime. The suspicion melted away. The young man was released with apologies. He stood in the courtyard afterward, in the early morning light, and thought about the farmer in the field. The old man had not been selling philosophy. He had been selling something more practical. A single piece of advice, small enough to carry, plain enough to remember, and alive enough to rise up at the one moment it was needed. The farmer had given the young man something a library could not have given him. He had given him one line, small and portable, that traveled with him through months of wandering and arrived, intact, at the exact moment it was needed. The young man had not studied the line. He had not analyzed it. He had carried it, the way someone carries a tool in a bag, barely thinking about it, until the moment comes when nothing else will do. This is what the verse in the Dhammapada means by one line that brings peace. The line does not need to be brilliant. It does not need to be original. It needs to be lived with, carried, kept close, and the carrying itself, over time, changes the person who carries it. The young man who left the farmer's field was the same person who arrived. But the young man who stood calmly in the courtyard, months later, while a household accused him, was someone different. The words had worked on him in the interval. They had entered the part of him that responds under pressure, and they had gently rearranged it. The Buddha understood that most of us will not remember 1,000 teachings. We will remember one, maybe two, and the one we remember will be the one that spoke to the exact place where we were struggling. The young man's struggle was with haste, with reacting before understanding. The farmer's words met him there. If his struggle had been with anger, a different line would have met him. If it had been with grief, another still. Let us explore another story. In the Zen tradition, there is an ancient practice of carrying short verses through the day. These verses are called gathas. They are only a few words long. A student memorizes one and recites it silently during ordinary tasks, while washing dishes, while sweeping, while walking from one room to another. The practice has been passed along in monasteries for over 2,000 years. When a novice enters a Zen monastery, one of the first things he may receive is a small collection of these verses. There is a story, told in several monasteries, about a young novice who arrived at a temple in the hills. He was eager. He had read many books. He was ready to learn great things. On his first morning, his teacher handed him a broom and a single line written on a strip of paper. The line said, "Waking up this morning, I smile. Sweep the courtyard," the teacher said, "and carry this line with you while you sweep." The novice took the broom and the paper. He swept the courtyard. He recited the line in his head as he swept. It took him perhaps 20 minutes. When he was done, he went back to the teacher. "I have swept the courtyard," he said, "and I recited the line. What is next?" "Tomorrow," the teacher said, "sweep the courtyard again and carry the same line." The novice was puzzled. He had expected something more, a teaching, a discussion, a new verse, at least. But the teacher had turned back to his own work. The next morning, the novice swept and recited. The morning after that, the same. After a week of this, he went to the teacher again. "Teacher," he said, "I have been sweeping and reciting for 7 days. I feel I have learned this line. May I have a new one?" The teacher looked at him. "What did you notice this morning while you were sweeping?" The novice thought. "The leaves," he said. "There were more leaves today than yesterday. The wind must have been strong last night. And what else?" And the novice tried to remember. He could not think of anything else. "Go back tomorrow," the teacher said. Same line, same courtyard. The novice went. He swept. he recited. And this time, because the teacher had asked him what he noticed, he paid closer attention. He noticed the shape of the stones under the leaves. He noticed a spider rebuilding a web between two pillars. He noticed the temperature of the air on his hands, cool near the stone wall, warmer in the open. He noticed his own breathing, slow and even, matching the rhythm of the broom. He stayed with that single line for 3 months. By the end, he was not reciting it anymore. The line had become part of the sweeping. The sweeping had become part of the breathing. And the mornings in the courtyard had become the most awake hours of his day. When the teacher finally gave him a second verse, the novice smiled. He understood now what the first one had been doing. It had not been teaching him words. It had been teaching him how to arrive in his own life. The novice's teacher had given him the Gatha tradition in its simplest form. One line, one task, one morning at a time. The teaching was not in the words. It was in the practice of returning to the words, day after day, until the words and the life became the same thing. The Buddhist tradition has a phrase for this kind of carrying. It calls it recollection, the practice of remembering, over and over, to come back, to the breath, to the moment, to the body, to the actual experience of this present life. The line you carry becomes the thread that pulls you back to the present, gently, each time the mind has wandered into tomorrow or yesterday. Tonight, there is no line to memorize, no verse to carry into tomorrow. But somewhere, in what has been said over these hours, there may be a phrase that stayed while the others passed through. If there is, it can be held lightly. It does not have to be understood tonight. It can simply be noticed, the way the novice noticed the spider's web one morning, something that had always been there, suddenly seen. The teachings travel this way. They do not arrive all at once. They arrive in single lines, carried through single days, repeated quietly until they have become part of the person who carries them. Rest here. Let whatever has stayed with you begin to settle. We will continue in a moment, together. For many people, the work of becoming more peaceful turns, somewhere along the way, into another battle. Another set of standards to fall short of. Another voice keeping score. The person who set out to be kinder to themselves ends up grading themselves on their kindness, and the grading is anything but kind. The Dhammapada speaks to this in its chapter on anger, using the image of a charioteer. One who steadies rising anger the way a charioteer steadies swerving horses, the verse says, truly holds the reins. And in the next verse, conquer anger with gentleness, meanness with generosity, falsehood with truth. These verses are about something more than managing anger. They are about the quality of the hand on the reins. A hand that grips too hard will hurt the horse and lose control. A hand that holds too loosely will lose the horse entirely. The verse is pointing at the kind of steadiness that comes from somewhere between force and surrender. In the Buddhist tradition, this is called the middle way, and it has a story behind it that begins in the Buddha's own life. Before he became the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama spent 6 years in the forest trying to find peace through severity. He had left his palace, left his family, left every comfort behind. And then, believing that the body was the obstacle, he tried to overcome it through punishment. He ate almost nothing. He slept on the bare ground. He sat for so long without moving that birds nested in his hair. He grew thin and weak. He was not alone in this. The forests of ancient India were full of ascetics who believed that the harsher the practice, the closer one came to truth. They denied themselves food and comfort, held difficult postures for hours, exposed themselves to the elements. The logic was simple. The body is the source of craving, so punish the body and the craving will stop. But the craving did not stop. After 6 years of this, the Buddha was no closer to peace than when he had begun. His body was exhausted. His mind was clouded. The severity had not worked. He had tried to fight his way to peace, and the fighting had become its own kind of prison. This is something many of us recognize, even if we have never lived in a forest. The habit of turning peace into another battle. The inner voice that says, try harder. Push through. If it hurts, that means it is working. If it is easy, you are not doing it right. We carry this voice into our work, our relationships, our attempts at self-improvement. We make peace into a project, and then we grade ourselves on the project, and then we lie awake at night, grading the grading. The Buddha, lying on the forest floor after 6 years of this, had reached the end of the approach. Force had not worked. Punishment had not worked. War against the body and the mind had produced only exhaustion. And then something happened that the tradition has never forgotten. A young woman from a nearby village came to the place where the Buddha was sitting. She was carrying a bowl of rice cooked in milk, a simple meal she had prepared as an offering. She saw the thin, weary man and offered it to him. He took the bowl. He ate. The other ascetics who had been practicing with him were horrified. They saw him eating and believed he had given up. They turned away and left. But for the Buddha, the bowl of milk rice was the beginning of everything. As the food entered his body, something cleared. He remembered, suddenly, a moment from his childhood. He had been a boy, perhaps 7 or 8, sitting under a rose apple tree while his father worked nearby. Without trying, without effort, the boy had slipped into a state of calm so deep and natural that he had never forgotten it. He had not been denying himself. He had not been punishing himself. He had simply been present, at ease in his own body, under a tree, on an ordinary afternoon. The memory changed everything. The Buddha saw, in that moment, that the peace he had been searching for through severity had been available to him as a child, without any effort at all. The harshness had been taking him further from it, not closer. The body was not the enemy. The body was the ground he was standing on. He sat down that evening under a fig tree, with a full stomach and a rested body, and he sat through the night. By morning, he had awakened. The middle way had found its teacher. There is a story from the early Buddhist texts about a monk named Sona who had been a musician before he entered the monastic life. He was an intense practitioner. He walked in meditation until his body ached. He sat for so long that he could barely stand afterward. He was trying, with everything he had, to force his way to peace. The Buddha saw what was happening and went to speak with him. "Sona," the Buddha said, "when you were a young man, you played the lute." "Yes, I did." "Tell me, when the strings of the lute were wound too tight, did the lute play well?" "No," Sona said. "The strings would snap, and when the strings were too loose, no sound at all, and when they were tuned to the middle, neither too tight nor too loose." Sona smiled. Then the music came. It is the same with the heart, the Buddha said. If you strain too hard, the mind becomes rigid and anxious. If you are too lax, the mind drifts and nothing takes root. The practice, like the string, needs to find its own pitch. And that pitch is always changing. What is right today may be too tight tomorrow. What is right tomorrow may be too loose the next day. The tuning never ends. Sona went back to his practice. He eased up. He stopped punishing his body. He let the practice breathe. And in time, he found what all the straining had not been able to give him. The lute is one of the great images in Buddhism because it places the work of peace exactly where the charioteer verse places it, in the quality of the hand. The hand on the reins, the hand on the strings, the gentle, attentive, responsive touch that is neither gripping nor letting go. Most of us, when we try to work on ourselves, default to one extreme or the other. We push hard. We make resolutions. We declare war on our bad habits. We set impossible standards and then punish ourselves when we fall short. Or we give up entirely. We decide the work is too hard, the mind too unruly, the effort too exhausting, and we stop trying. The middle way is neither of these. It is the steady, patient presence of someone who has learned that force does not work, and that giving up does not work, and that the space between the two is where the music lives. This is what the verse means when it says, "Conquer anger with gentleness." The word conquer sounds active, and it is. Gentleness is not passivity. A gentle hand on the reins is still a hand on the reins. A gentle voice speaking to someone in anger is still a voice that speaks. But the gentleness changes the quality of the action entirely. It changes what the anger meets when it arrives. Instead of meeting more anger, which fuels it, or meeting nothing, which lets it run wild, the anger meets something steady and warm. And in that meeting, the anger often finds that it has nowhere left to go. The Buddha knew this in his body. He had tried force for 6 years. He had tried luxury for his entire childhood. Neither one had given him peace. What gave him peace was the memory of an ordinary afternoon under a tree when his body was fed and his mind was quiet and no one was asking anything of him. The ease of that afternoon had been available to him the whole time. He had simply been looking in the wrong direction, first toward comfort, then toward harshness. The middle way was neither. It was the ground he had been standing on all along. Let us explore a story about this. In a province known for its horsemen, there was a young rider who had been given a difficult horse. The horse was strong, fast, and beautiful, but it would not be still. It startled at small sounds. It shied from shadows. It fought the reins whenever the rider tried to control it. The young rider, who was proud and strong, tried to master the horse through force. He pulled the reins hard. He used his heels. He raised his voice. The horse responded with more resistance. It reared. It bucked. It refused to move in a straight line. After many weeks of this, the rider's hands were sore and his patience was gone. He went to see an old horsewoman who lived at the edge of the town. She was known for being able to calm any horse. "My horse fights me," the rider said. "I have used every method I know. I have been firm. I have been strong. The horse will not obey. The old woman asked to see the horse. The rider brought it to her yard. The horse was tense, ears back, nostrils wide. The old woman walked up to the horse slowly. She did not reach for the reins. She stood beside the horse's shoulder, close but not touching. She stood there for a long time. The horse shifted. It blew air. It looked at her sideways. She did not move. After several minutes, the horse lowered its head. Its ears came forward. Its breathing slowed. The old woman placed one hand, very gently, on the horse's neck. "Your trouble," she said to the rider, "is that you are holding the reins the way you hold everything. With force. The horse feels it. The horse answers force with force. It is the only language you have given it. What should I do instead?" "Soften your hands," she said. The horse knows the difference between a hand that is holding on and a hand that is holding with. One grips. The other guides. The horse will follow the second. It will always fight the first. The young rider did not believe this at first, but he was tired of fighting, and his hands were sore. So he tried. He softened his grip. He stopped pulling. He held the reins the way the old woman held the horse's neck, with presence instead of pressure. The first few days, the horse tested him. It swerved. It tried to bolt. The young rider's instinct was to grip, and several times he did. But each time, the old woman's words returned to him. A hand that is holding with, and he would soften again. It took time. The horse did not trust the change immediately. Weeks passed, but slowly something shifted between them. The horse stopped rearing. It stopped shying. It began to respond to the lightest touch, a slight pressure on one rein, a shift of weight in the saddle. The communication between them became so quiet that an observer would not have been able to see the rider doing anything at all. The horse seemed to know where to go on its own. But it was not on its own. It was following the softest kind of guidance, a kind that only trust can produce. The rider, who had been gripping everything in his life with the same hard hands, found that his shoulders had come down. His jaw had unclenched. The horse had taught him something about himself that no teacher had ever been able to put into words. The old horsewoman had given the rider what the Buddha gave Sona. She had shown him the difference between holding on and holding with, between gripping and guiding, between the tight string and the tuned one. The charioteer in the Dhammapada verse is the same figure. He steadies the swerving horses, the verse says. He does not break them. He does not abandon the reins. He steadies them the way the lute player tunes a string, with presence, with attention, with a hand that has learned, through long practice, how much pressure is exactly enough. The Buddha said, "Conquer anger with gentleness." This is not a passive teaching. Gentleness, in the Buddha's understanding, requires more strength than force. Anyone can grip the reins. Anyone can pull hard. It takes a lifetime of practice to learn the soft hand that the horse actually follows. Tonight, the practice is simply this. Whatever you have been gripping, you can soften your hold on it. Just for these hours. The worries of the day, the plans for tomorrow, the arguments still running in the back of the mind. You do not have to let go of them entirely. You can simply loosen your grip. Hold them lightly, the way the horsewoman held the horse's neck, with presence, without pressure. The middle way is here, in this bed, in this breath. The string does not need to be tighter. It does not need to be looser. It is already tuned to this moment, if the hands will let it be. Breathe gently. Let the hands open. And when you are ready, we will go on together. Near the end of his life, the Buddha gave his students a final instruction. He was 80 years old. He was lying on his side between two trees in a grove outside a small town. His closest students had gathered around him. Many of them were weeping. He told them, "Be a lamp unto yourselves. Take refuge in yourselves and in nothing else. Let truth be your lamp and your refuge, and seek no other." This was the last thing the Buddha wanted them to hear. After 45 years of teaching, after thousands of conversations and discourses and stories, he chose to end with this: be your own lamp. Of all the things he could have left them with, he left them with themselves. There is a verse in the Dhammapada that carries the same teaching. It says, "You are your own refuge. Who else could be your refuge?" And another, "By oneself is harm done. By oneself is one made pure. No one purifies another." And a third, even more direct, "The awakened ones only point the way. The walking is yours." These verses place the work of peace exactly where it belongs, in the hands of the person doing the walking. In the Buddhist tradition, the teaching, "Be a lamp unto yourself," has been carried forward as one of the central insights of the path. It does not mean that teachers are unimportant. The Buddha himself was a teacher. He spent his life teaching. His students loved him and relied on him. But he knew something about reliance that most of us take a long time to learn, that the deepest kind of help any teacher can give is the help that makes the student no longer need the teacher. This is different from how most of us think about guidance. We tend to look outward. We look for the right book, the right teacher, the right community, the right practice. We believe that peace is something held by someone who knows more than we do, and that if we can just find that person, they will hand it to us. Most of us have spent years doing this. We read a book and feel moved, and we think the book has given us something. We meet a teacher and feel calm in their presence, and we think the teacher has given us something. We attend a retreat and feel a quiet settling inside, and we think the retreat has given us something. And all of these things are true in their way. The book, the teacher, the retreat, all played a part. But the peace we felt was not in any of them. It was in us. They simply created the conditions for us to notice it. The Buddha kept pointing in this direction. He kept saying, "The capacity for peace is already in you. The awareness that can see clearly is already in you. The wisdom that knows what is true and what is not is already in you. The teacher's job is to point at it the way a finger points at the moon. But the moon is not the finger, and the seeing has to be your own." There is an old Zen teaching about this. A teacher raised his finger and pointed at the full moon. "Look," he said. His student stared carefully at the finger. The teacher shook his head. "You are looking at the wrong thing," he said. "The finger is just showing you where to look. The moon is what you need to see. And the moon is not in my hand. It is in the sky." The teaching is a gentle warning. Every tradition, every book, every teacher, Every practice is a finger. They are all pointing at something, but the something they are pointing at is not in the tradition, the book, the teacher, or the practice. It is in the person who is looking. Let us explore a story about this. In a mountainous region, there lived a young woman who had spent many years traveling from teacher to teacher. She was serious about the inner life. She had studied with scholars in the cities. She had sat in meditation halls in the hills. She had listened to wandering monks at crossroads. She had collected teachings the way some people collect rare objects, carefully, reverently, always looking for the next one. By the time she was 30, she had visited more than a dozen teachers. She had notebooks full of instructions. She could recite long passages from memory. She knew the names of practices she had never practiced and could explain ideas she had never tested. She was, by any measure of her world, a serious student. But she was not at peace. One autumn, she heard about a teacher who lived in a small hut at the top of a mountain pass. He was old. He saw very few visitors. People said he had been practicing for 50 years and had become very quiet. She made the long climb. She arrived at the hut in the late afternoon. The old teacher was outside, sitting on a flat stone, mending a sandal. He looked up when she approached. "I have been studying for many years," she said, when she had caught her breath. "I have visited many teachers. I have learned a great deal, but I still have not found what I am looking for." The old teacher set down the sandal. He looked at her for a long time. "What have your teachers told you?" he asked. She began to recite. She spoke for a long time. She told him about impermanence, about the nature of suffering, about compassion and wisdom and the noble truths. She quoted verses. She described practices. She was thorough. She was impressive. When she was finished, the old teacher nodded slowly. "You have learned a great deal," he said. "Now tell me, which of these teachings have you lived?" She was quiet. She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. "I am not sure," she said, finally. "That is the trouble," the old teacher said. He picked up his sandal again and went back to mending it. "You have been collecting lamps, but you have not lit any of them." She sat on the ground near the stone. The afternoon light moved through the trees. She watched him mend the sandal. His hands were steady and unhurried. "How do I begin?" she asked, after a long silence. "You have already begun," he said. "You climbed a mountain to ask a question you already knew the answer to. The answer is, stop collecting. Light one lamp. Any lamp. It does not matter which one. Light it and tend it and let it show you the next step. The lamp you light with your own hands will show you more than 1,000 lamps you have only looked at." She stayed at the hut for 3 days. The teacher did not give her any new teaching. He mended sandals. He cooked rice. He sat. She sat with him. When she left, she carried no new notebooks. She carried no new instructions. She carried only the question the old teacher had given her. "Which of these teachings have you lived?" She walked down the mountain slowly. She chose one teaching, the simplest one she knew, and she began to live it. She did not visit another teacher for a long time after that. The old teacher had given the young woman the same instruction the Buddha gave on his deathbed. "Be your own lamp." Stop looking for someone else to carry the light. The light is yours. It always has been. The work is to light it. There is something the young woman had been doing that most of us do, often without realizing it. She had been postponing her own practice. Each new teacher was another delay. Each new notebook was another reason not to begin the actual work. The collecting had become a substitute for the walking, and the collecting felt productive because she was always learning something new. But learning about peace is not the same as being at peace. Knowing the names of all the stars does not mean you have ever looked up at the sky. There is a freedom in this teaching. It means that the path does not depend on finding the right teacher, the right book, or the right circumstances. It depends on the willingness to begin, to take one teaching, any teaching, and carry it into the next hour of ordinary life. The lamp does not have to be the best lamp or the most beautiful lamp. It just has to be lit. The Dhammapada says, "The awakened ones only point the way." The walking is yours. This is both a responsibility and a gift. A responsibility because no one else can do the walking for us. A gift because it means the path is always available. We do not have to wait for permission. We do not have to earn our way to the starting line. We can begin tonight with whatever small piece of wisdom has landed in us, and let that be enough. There is a famous story in the Zen tradition that comes at this from another angle. There is a Zen tale about a student who came to a teacher and asked for the truth. The teacher poured him a cup of tea. The student held the cup. The teacher kept pouring. The tea rose to the brim, then overflowed, running across the table and onto the floor. "The cup is full," the student said, startled. "No more will go in." "You are like this cup," the teacher said. "You are full of opinions, full of teachings, full of what you have already learned. How can I show you anything until you empty your cup?" The story is often told as a lesson about humility, and it is. But there is something else in it that belongs to this module. The teacher did not fill the cup with his own wisdom. He showed the student that the cup was already full. The student's job was not to receive more. It was to set down what he was carrying so that something new could enter. This is the paradox at the heart of the lamp teaching. The Buddha spent 45 years giving people wisdom, and his final instruction was, "Do not depend on what I have given you. Be your own lamp." He was not contradicting himself. He was saying that the teachings were never the point. The teachings were the finger pointing at the moon. The student who collects fingers has missed the moon entirely. The moon, in this teaching, is the capacity each of us has to see clearly, to be present, to know what is true. It does not belong to any teacher. It belongs to the sky, which is to say, it belongs to everyone who looks up. This is why the Dhammapada says, "You are your own refuge." Who else could be your refuge? The verse is not being cold. It is being honest. The people who love us can walk beside us. They can point at things we have not seen. They can encourage us when the road is dark. But they cannot walk our steps for us. They cannot see through our eyes. They cannot make our peace. The peace, when it comes, will come from inside the person who has done the work of tending. And no one, however wise or loving, can do that tending on our behalf. There is a freedom in this that takes time to feel. At first, it can sound lonely. No one can carry my lamp for me? No one can do the work? But once the loneliness passes, what remains is something steadier. The recognition that the lamp is already there. that it has always been there, that the searching for someone else to light it was, all along, the thing that kept us from seeing that it was already burning. Tonight, there is nothing to look for outside this room. The lamp the Buddha spoke of is not in a temple or a book or a teacher's words. It is in the quiet awareness that is here right now, noticing the breath, noticing the body, noticing the dark. This awareness did not have to be taught. It was here before any teaching arrived. It will be here after the teachings are forgotten. It is the simplest thing about being alive, the fact that something in us is present right now and knows it is present. That is the lamp. It does not need to be earned or deserved. It is already lit. The work is simply to notice that it is there and to trust it, even when the night is long and the room is dark. Settle here. Let the lamp be what it is. And when you are ready, we will go on together. There is a verse in the Dhammapada that the Buddha called an ancient and unending law. He did not say he had invented it. He said it had been true before him and would be true long after. It was simply how things worked, the way water runs downhill, the way fire needs air. A law of the heart, as reliable as any law of the earth. The verse says this: hatred is never ended by hatred. Hatred is ended only by love. This is an ancient and eternal truth. And then, in the very next verse, the Buddha adds something quieter. He says, "Those who quarrel have forgotten that all of us here will one day die. Those who remember it find that their quarrels grow still on their own." The first verse is about what dissolves a feud. The second is about why feuds dissolve when something larger enters the room. Most of us carry, somewhere in the back of our minds, an old belief about fairness. The belief says, if someone has harmed me, I am owed something. A correction, an apology, a balancing of the scales. If I give back what was given to me, the books will close. The account will be settled. This belief feels natural. It feels fair. And in the courts of the world, where property and contracts are at stake, it may even be useful. But the Buddha had watched this belief play out in the lives of his students for many years, and he had noticed something. The books never balance. The person who strikes back believes the account is now settled, but the other person does not agree. They feel the response was too harsh, or unjust, or came at the wrong time. So they respond in kind, and the first person responds again. And the scales, which were supposed to come into balance, keep tipping back and forth, sometimes for years, sometimes for generations. The verse names this plainly. Hatred is never ended by hatred. The mechanism does not work. It has never worked. Every act of retaliation produces a new grievance. Every correction produces a new injustice. The chain does not end because another link is added to it. The chain ends when someone sets it down. This is what the Buddha meant by love in this verse. The word in the original language is closer to non-hatred or the absence of ill will. It does not mean affection for the person who has harmed us. It means the willingness to stop adding links to the chain, to absorb the blow without passing it on, to let the account remain unbalanced, and to walk away from the ledger. This is hard. Most of us know it in principle and struggle with it in practice. The second verse opens a different door into the same room. It says that those who quarrel have forgotten that everyone in the quarrel is mortal, that every person on every side of every argument is here only briefly. This is a strange kind of medicine. The verse is not threatening anyone with death. It is offering a perspective so large that the quarrel, seen from inside it, simply looks different. There is something that happens when two people who have been arguing suddenly learn that one of them is ill, or that someone they both loved has died. The argument, which felt like the most important thing in the world 5 minutes ago, quietly steps aside. It does not vanish. It is still there. But it has been placed inside a larger frame, and inside that frame, it is smaller than it was. The Buddha was offering that larger frame to everyone, all the time, without waiting for illness or loss to provide it. He was saying, "You are both mortal. You are both here briefly. You are both going to leave this life, and when you do, the quarrel will mean nothing. If you can see this now, the quarrel can mean less right now, tonight, in this hour." Let us explore a story about this. In a valley where the land was divided by a low ridge of hills, two families had farmed neighboring fields for as long as anyone could remember. They were not related. They were simply neighbors. Their grandparents had been neighbors. Their great-grandparents before them. For most of those generations, the two families had lived peacefully. They shared the same well. Their children played together in the summers. When one family's harvest was thin, the other would leave a sack of grain by the fence without being asked. But something had gone wrong between the current heads of the two households. No one in the valley could say exactly what had started it. Some said it was a boundary dispute, a row of stones that one family had moved a few feet into the other's field. Some said it was an insult at a market, spoken carelessly and received sharply. Some said it was nothing at all, just the slow souring that sometimes happens between people who live too close and talk too little. Whatever the cause, the two men had stopped speaking. The well was now used in shifts, one family in the morning, the other in the evening. The children were forbidden to cross the ridge. The sacks of grain no longer appeared by the fence. This went on for 7 years. One autumn night, the elder of the two men could not sleep. He lay in his bed, turning over the quarrel in his mind, as he had done many times before. He was rehearsing what he would say if his neighbor ever came to apologize. He was polishing the argument, finding sharper words, arranging the evidence of his rightness. The wind moved in the trees outside his window. He rose and walked outside, into his fields. The harvest was in. The air was cool. The stars were very clear. As he stood at the edge of his field, near the ridge, he saw something moving on the other side. A figure walking slowly through the neighboring field. It was his neighbor, the other man, also unable to sleep, also walking his land in the dark. They saw each other across the ridge. For a long moment, neither moved. The elder man felt the old anger rise in him, but something else rose with it. A weariness, a tiredness he had not allowed himself to feel before. He had been carrying this quarrel for 7 years. He was older now. His hair had gone grey since the quarrel began. His knees ached in the mornings. He was, he realized, standing in a field in the middle of the night, preparing arguments against a man who was also standing in a field in the middle of the night, and both of them were growing old. He did not plan what he did next. He simply walked toward the ridge. His neighbor watched him come. He did not move. He did not turn away. When the elder man reached the top of the ridge, he stopped. His neighbor stood a few paces away, on his own side. "I cannot remember," the elder man said. "What started this?" His neighbor was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Neither can I." They stood there, the two of them, on the ridge between their fields, under the autumn stars. The wind moved through the stubble. Neither of them spoke for a while. "My father is buried in the orchard," the elder man said. "My mother beside him. I will be there too, before long. My wife's family is buried along the western fence," said the other man. "I have cleared the space beside her mother for myself." The elder man nodded. Something had shifted. The quarrel, which had filled his nights for 7 years, had been placed inside a larger frame. It was still there. He had not forgiven anything. He had not forgotten. But he had remembered something he had stopped seeing. That the man across the ridge was also going to die. That they were both only here for a short while. And that 7 years of that short while had already been given to this. "The well is getting low," the elder man said, after another silence. "It would be easier to share the digging." His neighbor thought about this. "It would," he said. They did not embrace. They did not apologize. They simply turned and walked back to their own houses. But the next morning, for the first time in 7 years, the elder man's granddaughter was seen walking along the ridge, carrying a small jug of honey to the other house. And no one stopped her. The two men on the ridge had not resolved their quarrel. They had not forgiven each other in any grand sense. They had simply remembered something that the quarrel had been covering over. That they were both mortal. That they were both old. That the night was large and the quarrel was small. This is what the second verse offers. It does not ask us to forgive in the way the word is often used, as if forgiveness means approving of what happened, or pretending the harm was not real, or agreeing to resume the relationship as if nothing had changed. The Buddha was not asking for any of those things. He was asking something more modest and more freeing. He was asking us to see the quarrel inside the larger truth of our shared mortality. And inside that truth, the quarrel takes up less room. The first verse says love is what ends hatred. The second verse says that the remembrance of death is what makes love possible. When we see the person who has harmed us as someone who is also going to die, something in the heart softens. We do not have to call it forgiveness. We can simply call it seeing clearly. Let us explore another story. In a village at the edge of a wide lake, there lived two potters who had once been close friends. They had learned the craft together as boys, working side by side in the same workshop. As young men, they had opened their own shops on the same street. For years, they shared clay, shared glazes, shared customers without any trouble. But a misunderstanding about a commission had driven them apart. A wealthy family had ordered a set of ceremonial bowls. Both potters believed the order had been given to them. Harsh words were exchanged. Each accused the other of dishonesty. The friendship ended. For 20 years, they worked on the same street without speaking. Their shops faced each other. Each morning, one would open his shutters and see the other doing the same. They would look away. One spring, the potter on the eastern side of the street fell ill. The illness was not sudden. It had been coming for a long time. He grew thinner. His hands, which had shaped thousands of bowls, began to tremble. He could no longer center the clay on the wheel. His son ran the shop now. The old potter sat in a chair by the door, watching the street, breathing slowly. The potter on the western side saw all of this. He watched from across the street as his old friend grew weaker. He watched the son struggle with the wheel, making the kinds of mistakes his father would never have made. He watched the old man sit by the door, smaller each week. One evening, after closing his own shop, the western potter did something he had not done in 20 years. He crossed the street. He stood in the doorway of the other man's shop. The old potter in the chair looked up at him. "I heard you were not well," the western potter said. "I am dying," said the other man, simply. The western potter sat down on the step beside the chair. They were quiet for a while. The lake was visible at the end of the street, turning gold in the late light. "The bowls," said the western potter, after a long time. "The bowls," said the other. "I cannot remember who was right. Does it matter?" The western potter shook his head. "It does not." They sat together as the light faded. The western potter reached over and took his old friend's hand. The old man's fingers were thin and cool. They had once been the strongest hands in the village. Now they rested, trembling slightly, inside the hands of the man who had not spoken to him in 20 years. "We wasted a long time," the western potter said. "We did," said the other. Neither of them said anything more. The son brought tea. They drank it together, watching the lake go dark. When the western potter finally stood to leave, the old man said, "Come again tomorrow." "I will," said the western potter. He came every evening for the rest of that spring. The old potter died in the summer. The western potter closed his shop for 3 days and helped the son with the burial. Then he went back to his wheel, on the other side of the street, and worked in silence for the rest of his years. The two potters had wasted 20 years over a set of bowls that neither of them could remember clearly. This is what the verse is quietly pointing at. The cost of carrying a quarrel is measured in the one thing none of us can afford to spend carelessly: time. The hours we give to the rehearsal of old wrongs are hours we do not get back. The Buddha taught that one of the deepest sources of peace in a human life is the willingness to set down what we are carrying. The grudge, the grievance, the old argument polished and repolished in the dark. These things take up space in the heart. They crowd out the quieter things. And when they are finally set down, what remains is not emptiness. What remains is room. Tonight, if there is someone you have been carrying, someone whose words or actions still take up space in the quiet hours, the verse offers a gentle recognition. The carrying itself is the heaviest part. The original harm happened once. The carrying happens every night. You do not have to forgive them tonight. You do not have to understand them. You do not have to agree that what they did was acceptable. You can simply notice the weight. You can notice how much of this hour, this quiet hour meant for rest, is being given to someone who is not in the room. And if it helps, you can remember what the two men on the ridge remembered: that everyone in the quarrel is mortal, that everyone in the quarrel is here only briefly, and that the time being spent on the quarrel is the same time that could be spent on something gentler. Let the breath settle. Let the weight, just for tonight, rest on the ground beside you rather than on your chest. And when you are ready, we will go on together. Everything that is made will come apart. Everything that is gathered will be dispersed. The Dhammapada says this plainly in a set of verses near its end, and it adds, when a person sees this clearly, suffering loosens its hold. This is the path to peace. The teaching is called impermanence. In the Pali language, the word is anicca. It means that nothing in the world of experience stays the same. The river is never the same river. The body is never the same body. The thought that is here now will not be here in a moment. Everything that arises will pass. Everything that is built will change. Everything that is gathered will, in time, scatter. This sounds, at first, like a hard teaching, but the Buddha did not offer it as a cause for sadness. He offered it as the ground of peace. Because when we stop expecting things to stay the same, we stop fighting the most basic fact of being alive. And when we stop fighting that fact, something in us begins to rest. Most of our suffering, in the Buddhist understanding, comes from the belief that things should be permanent. We fall in love and believe the feeling should never change. We build something and believe it should last forever. We feel well and believe we should always feel well. And when the feeling changes, when the thing we built begins to wear, when the body grows tired, we experience suffering. The suffering is real. But the Buddha pointed out that the suffering is not in the changing. It is in the expecting. The river does not suffer because it flows. The river flows because that is what rivers do. The suffering comes when we stand on the bank and demand that the water hold still. The recognition is a gentle one. It does not ask us to stop caring about the things we love. It asks us to love them the way we love a sunset. Fully, openly, knowing it will change. The sunset is not less beautiful because it fades. It may even be more beautiful because the fading is part of what makes us pay attention. In the Buddhist world, there is a living tradition that teaches this without a single word. In the Buddhist tradition, there is a practice that has been carried on for centuries in the monasteries of Tibet and the Himalayan region. A group of monks will gather in a temple or a public hall and spend many days creating a work of art from colored sand. Grain by grain, using thin metal tubes, they lay down intricate patterns of extraordinary beauty. Circles within circles. Lines so fine they seem impossible. Colors that glow against the dark surface beneath them. The work takes days, sometimes weeks. The monks work in silence, bending close to the surface, placing each grain with the care of someone who knows that a single misplaced particle will change the whole pattern. Visitors come and watch. The design grows, slowly, from the center outward, until the entire surface is covered in a mandala of astonishing detail. And then, when the work is complete, the monks sweep it away. In a single ceremony, with brushes and gentle hands, they push the sand toward the center of the design. The circles dissolve. The fine lines disappear. The colors blend into a gray pile. What took many days to build is undone in minutes. The remaining sand is gathered into a jar and carried to the nearest river, where it is poured into the water and carried downstream. A visitor who watched this for the first time once asked one of the monks why they destroyed something so beautiful. The monk said, "We did not destroy it. We completed it." The visitor did not understand. The beauty of the mandala is not in the finished design, the monk said. The beauty is in the making and the letting go. If we kept the mandala, it would become a possession, something to protect, something to worry about. By releasing it, we give the beauty back. The sand returns to the river. The river carries it to the sea. The beauty does not end. It changes form. The visitor thought about this for a long time. She had come to the monastery carrying something of her own, a loss she had not been able to release, a change in her life she had been resisting for many months. She had held on to the way things had been, the way she wanted them to stay, with the same care the monks had used to place each grain of sand. She watched the grey pile of sand being carried to the river. She watched the monk pour it into the water. She watched the current take it. She did not let go of her own loss that afternoon. That would take longer, but she saw, for the first time, that letting go might look different than she had imagined. It might look less like losing and more like completing, less like an ending and more like a return. The monks who build the sand mandala are practicing what the Dhammapada teaches. They pour their finest work into something they know will not last. And the not lasting is not the tragedy. It is the point. The mandala teaches impermanence by being impermanent. It does not need to explain the lesson. It is the lesson. This is what the Buddha saw when he looked at the world. He saw the mandala everywhere, in the body, which changes every day, in the seasons, which turn whether we are ready or not, in the relationships that shift and deepen and sometimes end, in the thoughts that arise and pass through the mind like weather. Everything is the mandala. Everything is being made, grain by grain, and everything is being returned. The monk who told the visitor, "We completed it," was pointing at something most of us spend our lives resisting. That the letting go is part of the making. That a thing fully loved and fully released has been honored more deeply than a thing clutched and defended. The monks did not love the mandala less because they swept it away. They may have loved it more, because their love was not tangled up with the need to keep it. Let us explore another story. In a village near a wide river, there lived a boatman who had been ferrying people across the water for most of his life. He was old now. His arms were still strong, but his hair was white and his movements were slower than they had been. A young man from the village came to him one day. The young man was troubled. He had recently lost someone dear to him, and the loss had left him unable to sleep, unable to work, unable to see the point of anything. "How do you bear it?" the young man asked the boatman. "You have been alive a long time. You must have lost many people." The boatman set down his oar. He looked at the river. "Do you see the water?" he said. "Yes." "Is it the same water that was here yesterday?" The young man looked. "No," he said. "The current has carried it downstream. This is new water." "And tomorrow?" "Tomorrow it will be different water again." "Yes," said the boatman. "And is the river still a river?" The young man was quiet for a moment. "Yes," he said. "It is still a river." "That is how I bear it," the boatman said. "The water changes. The river remains. The people I have loved are like the water. They have moved on. But the love is like the river. It is still here. It did not leave when they did." The young man sat on the bank for a long time after the boatman went back to his work. He watched the water move. He did not feel better exactly, but something had shifted. The loss was still there, but it was inside something larger now, something that held both the loss and the love at the same time, the way the river holds both the water that is here and the water that has already passed. He came back the next day. He sat on the bank again. The boatman did not say anything. He simply ferried his passengers back and forth, and the young man watched the water. After a week of this, the young man noticed something. The river was different every day. The color changed with the light. The speed changed with the season. Some days it was broad and slow. Some days it was narrow and fast. The banks shifted. A rock that had been visible one morning was underwater the next. And yet it was the same river his grandmother had known, the same river the village had been named for. The changing had not taken the river away. The changing was the river. He stopped coming to the bank after a few weeks. He went back to his work. He did not forget his loss, but he carried it differently. He carried it the way the river carried its water, with movement, with flow, without trying to hold anything in place. The boatman's teaching is the same one the Dhammapada offers. The changing is not the enemy. The changing is what life is. The peace comes when we learn to hold the changing lightly, the way the river holds its water, letting each moment pass through without trying to keep it. The Buddha once described all experience as being like a dream, a dewdrop, a flash of lightning. He was not saying these things are unreal. He was saying they are brief. And the brevity, when we see it clearly, does not make them less precious. It makes them more so. The dewdrop on the grass in the early morning is beautiful precisely because it will not be there by noon. If it lasted forever, we would stop seeing it. There is a teaching in the Buddhist tradition that one of the deepest sources of peace is the willingness to be present with what is here without needing it to stay. This is different from resignation. Resignation says, nothing matters because everything ends. Presence says, everything matters because everything ends. The two sound similar. They are opposite. Resignation turns away from life. Presence turns toward it, fully, with open eyes, knowing that what is here now will not be here forever, and loving it all the more for that. Tonight, whatever has changed recently, whatever is in the process of changing, the verse offers a quiet recognition. The changing is not something going wrong. It is the river doing what rivers do. The love, the care, the attention we have given to the things that are passing through, these do not disappear when the things themselves move on. They remain, the way the riverbed remains after the water has flowed. Breathe here for a moment. Let the night be what it is, moving and still at once. When you are ready, we will go on. There is a verse in the Flowers chapter of the Dhammapada that uses an image so quiet it can slip past if you are not paying attention. The verse says, as the bee takes nectar and moves on, without bruising the flower's color or fragrance, so the wise move through the village. It is a small verse. A bee, a flower, a village. But inside it is a teaching about how a peaceful person touches the world. Lightly, without taking more than is needed, without leaving a mark of damage behind. And there is a companion verse nearby that adds something unexpected. It says, the fragrance of goodness travels even against the wind. Sandalwood, jasmine, the scent of flowers, all these travel with the wind. But the fragrance of a good life travels in every direction, even where the wind does not go. The bee is one of the oldest images in Buddhist teaching. The Buddha chose it carefully. A bee does not stay long at any flower. It arrives, takes what it needs, and moves on. The flower is left whole. Its color is not faded. Its fragrance is not diminished. And something has happened that neither the bee nor the flower intended. The pollen has been carried to the next blossom. The garden has been quietly served. The Buddha described the wise person moving through the world in the same way, receiving what is offered, giving something in return, and leaving each encounter no worse than it was. Most of us do not move through the world this way. We tend to leave marks. We take more than we need from conversations, from relationships, from the places we pass through. We grip. We extract. We leave people slightly more tired than they were before we arrived. This is not because we are bad people. It is because we are often not paying attention to the weight of our presence. The bee pays attention. The bee lands lightly. The bee takes only what will sustain it and moves on. The flower, after the bee has gone, is still a flower. It can still give nectar to the next visitor. The bee has received without depleting. There is a second verse in the flowers chapter that sharpens this image. It says, "A beautiful word that is not lived is like a bright flower with no scent. But a word that is truly lived bears fragrance, like a flower that is both beautiful and sweet." The verse is connecting two things, lightness of touch and depth of practice. The bee does not just look at the flower. The bee enters it. The nectar is taken in fully and becomes part of the bee. This is what it means to live a teaching rather than merely holding it at arm's length. In the Buddhist tradition, this is connected to the practice of generosity. Generosity, in the Buddhist understanding, is not only about giving things away. It is also about how we receive. A person who receives lightly, without grasping, without demanding more, without leaving the giver feeling diminished, is practicing a form of generosity that is rarely named, but deeply felt. Let us explore a story about this. In many Buddhist communities in Southeast Asia, the morning begins with a walk. The monks leave the monastery at dawn, carrying empty bowls. They walk in a line, barefoot, through the streets of the nearby village. They do not knock on doors. They do not ask for food. They simply walk, slowly, with their bowls open. The villagers come out to meet them. They bring rice, fruit, small cakes, whatever they have prepared that morning. They place the food in the bowls with both hands. Some bow. Some whisper a prayer. Some simply smile. The monks receive the food in silence. They do not say thank you. They do not look into the bowls. They continue walking. This exchange, which happens every morning in thousands of villages, has been going on for over 2,000 years. And the remarkable thing about it is that no one involved experiences it as charity. The villagers do not feel that they are giving to the poor. The monks do not feel that they are receiving from the rich. The exchange is something else. It is a shared practice. The villagers give because giving is their practice. The monks receive because receiving, openly and without grasping, is theirs. Both sides are practicing generosity. Both sides are the bee. Both sides are the flower. A traveler who witnessed this for the first time once described it this way. She said she had expected to feel sorry for the monks, walking barefoot with empty bowls, Instead, she felt something closer to envy. There was a quietness in the exchange that she had never seen in any transaction in her own life. No one was calculating. No one was keeping score. No one was asking whether the gift was enough or too much. The food moved from hand to bowl the way water moves from cloud to ground. Naturally, without negotiation, without remainder. She noticed something else. After the monks had passed, the villagers went back to their homes with a particular expression on their faces. She could not name it at first. Then she realized what it was. They looked lighter, as if the act of giving had taken something from them that they were glad to be rid of. The morning alms round is the bee verse made visible. The monks move through the village the way a bee moves through a garden. They take only what they need. They do not bruise the flower. And something invisible is carried between the giver and the receiver that enriches both, the way pollen enriches a garden without anyone planning it. The companion verse says that the fragrance of goodness travels even against the wind. This is what happens when a person moves through the world lightly. The effect does not stay in the place where the encounter happened. It travels. The villager who gave rice in the morning carries the warmth of that giving into the rest of her day. She is gentler with her children. She is more patient at the market. She gives a little extra to a neighbor who has less. The giving multiplies, quietly, in directions no one can predict. This is the fragrance the verse is pointing at. It does not come from effort. It comes from the natural overflow of a life that has been tended. A settled heart, moving through the world, leaves something behind, the way a flower leaves fragrance in the air. The flower is not trying to be fragrant. It simply is, because it is healthy, and the fragrance follows. An old story from the Buddhist tradition carries this further. In an old collection of Indian folk tales called the Jataka, which Buddhists believe record the previous lives of the Buddha, there is a story about a small bird in a great forest. One day, a fire broke out at the edge of the forest. The flames spread quickly, driven by a dry wind. The animals of the forest fled. The elephants ran. The deer ran. The monkeys swung through the highest branches towards safety. The small bird did not flee. Instead, she flew to the river, dipped her wings in the water, and flew back over the burning forest. She shook her wings, and a few drops of water fell onto the flames. Then she flew back to the river and did it again, and again, back and forth, carrying a few drops each time. The other animals, watching from a safe distance, thought she had lost her mind. An elephant called out to her, "What are you doing? Your few drops cannot put out this fire. You are wasting your effort." The small bird paused on a branch, her feathers singed. "I know," she said, "but I am doing what I can. The forest has sheltered me my whole life. I cannot save it, but I will not do nothing." She flew back to the river. She dipped her wings. She returned. The story says that the gods, watching from above, were so moved by the small bird's effort that they sent rain. The fire was put out. The forest was saved. The small bird is the bee verse lived out in a different form. She did not move through the world heavily, with the power of an elephant or the speed of a deer. She moved lightly, with what she had, doing what was in front of her. Her few drops of water were not going to save the forest. She knew that. But the doing itself, the steady, quiet, unglamorous doing, was its own kind of fragrance. It traveled, in the story, all the way to the gods. There is a teaching in this story that connects to the broader thread of tonight's episode. The Dhammapada has been describing, from many angles, what a peaceful life looks like. The B verse adds something the other teachings did not name directly. It says that a peaceful life is not only good for the person living it, it is good for everyone the person touches. The fragrance spreads. The drops of water, small as they are, land somewhere. The Buddha was a practical teacher. He did not ask his students to change the world. He asked them to tend their own hearts and to move through the world lightly enough that their presence was a gift rather than a burden. The bee does not set out to pollinate the garden. It sets out to gather nectar. The pollination is a consequence of the lightness with which the gathering is done. The Buddhist path makes a quiet promise here, that the work we do on ourselves, privately in the early morning hours and the late evening hours, does not stay private. It enters the world through the quality of our presence, through the way we listen to a friend, through the patience we show to a stranger, through the small, unnoticed moments of care that no one will ever see but that leave the world, in some tiny way, a little more whole than it was. The Dhammapada does not promise that our efforts will save the world. It promises something quieter, that a person who moves through life the way the bee moves through the garden, receiving without grasping, giving without counting, leaving each encounter whole, produces a fragrance that travels further than they will ever know. Against the wind, in every direction, long after they have moved on. Tonight, the practice is simple. You have moved through a day. You have had conversations, encounters, moments of contact with other people. Some of these you will remember. Many you will not. But in each one, something was left behind. A tone, a quality of attention, a way of being with the person in front of you. For tonight, let the encounters rest. Whatever was given, whatever was received, the exchange is over. The bee has moved on. The flowers are whole. And the fragrance, whatever it was, is already traveling. Let the body grow heavy. Let the breath find its own quiet rhythm. In a little while, we will take the last steps of the night together. We have come to the last teaching of the night. The Dhammapada has been walking with us for many hours now, from the opening verse about the mind that shapes all things, through the thatched roof and the middle way and the lamp and the bee, to this final place. And for the final place, the Buddha chose an image that gathers everything else into one. The verse says, by steady effort, care and self-mastery, the wise build an island that no flood can overwhelm. An island, above the flood, built slowly, stone by stone, by the person who will live on it. The flood, in the Buddha's teaching, is the constant rush of the world. The wanting, the worrying, the reaching, the comparing. The mind that never quite settles because there is always one more thing to chase, one more problem to solve, one more future to prepare for. This is the flood. It moves through every life. It does not stop moving because we want it to. The island is what we build inside ourselves through the slow work of tending the heart. Each teaching the Dhammapada has offered tonight is a stone in that island. The recognition that the mind shapes experience. The tending of the inner life before the storm arrives. The practical path, tested in daily life. The two wings of wisdom and compassion beating together. The single verse carried through an ordinary day. The kind hand, neither gripping nor letting go. The lamp lit from within. The quarrel set down. The river of change accepted and released. The bee's light touch, leaving each encounter whole. Each of these teachings, when lived, raises the ground a little. The flood is still there. The water still moves. But the person who has done the work of tending, day by day, season by season, finds that they are standing on something that does not wash away. The Buddha did not promise that the flood would stop. He was a careful teacher. He knew that the world would go on being the world. That difficulty would arrive. That loss would come. That the mind would sometimes be restless, sometimes be afraid, sometimes be pulled by old habits toward old grooves. The flood is part of being alive. What he promised was that the ground we build inside ourselves is real. That the work we do, the patience we practice, the kindness we extend to our own minds produces something solid. Something that holds when the water rises. The island is not a retreat from the world. It is a place to stand while the world does what it does. There is a verse elsewhere in the Dhammapada that says, "For one who clings to nothing, how could there be grief?" The verse is not asking us to care about nothing. It is pointing at a way of holding what we love that does not collapse when the thing we love changes. The island is this way of holding, open-handed, present, warm, but not clutching. The image of the island is a gentle one. An island does not fight the water. It does not push the river back. It simply rises above it, the way a hill rises above a valley, by being what it is. The work of building the island is quiet work. It happens in the ordinary hours. In the morning, when we choose patience instead of irritation. In the evening, when we let the day go instead of carrying it to bed. In the middle of the night, when the mind begins to race and we bring it back, gently, to the breath. Each of these moments is a stone laid above the waterline. Let us explore a story about this. In a river valley where the floods came every year, there was a family who had lived on the same piece of land for many generations. Their house stood on a low rise above the river. The rise was not natural. It had been built over many lifetimes by the family itself. The grandmother told the story this way. When her great-grandmother first came to the valley, the land was flat. The river flooded every spring. The water came into the houses. People lost their stores. They rebuilt. The water came again. Her great-grandmother had begun the work. Each dry season, she carried stones from the river bank and laid them on the ground where the house stood. She packed earth between the stones. She added another layer. Over many years, the ground beneath the house rose by the height of a single step. Her daughter continued the work. Another generation of stones. Another step above the waterline. The house rose slowly, year by year, while the river continued to do what rivers do. By the time the grandmother was telling the story, the house stood on a rise, the height of a grown person above the floodplain. The river came every spring. The water rose around the base of the rise. It lapped at the stones the great-grandmother had laid, and the family sat inside, dry, with the fire lit and the children sleeping, while the water moved harmlessly below. "We did not stop the river," the grandmother said. We just built the ground a little higher each year. The work was never finished. My mother added stones. I added stones. My daughters will add stones. The river will always come. But the house is above it now, because someone, a long time ago, decided to carry the first stone. A grandchild, listening from the doorway, asked, "What if the river rises higher than the stones?" The grandmother looked at her. "Then we carry more stones," she said. "The river has its work. We have ours." This is the quiet dignity of the island teaching. It does not promise that the work will be finished. It does not promise that the flood will never reach us. It promises that the work itself is good, that each stone matters, that the person who carries one stone today and another tomorrow and another the day after that is building something real, even if they cannot see the finished shape from where they are standing. The grandmother's story is the Dhammapada's closing image made visible. The island is not built in a single effort. It is built over a lifetime, over many lifetimes, if we count the teachings that were carried forward by the people who came before us. The Buddha's own teaching was a stone laid down long ago. Every teacher since has added another. Every student who has practiced honestly in their own quiet life has added another. The ground rises slowly, and the flood passes over it, and the people who have done the work rest easy. One more story for the end of the night. In a small harbour town, there lived an old woman who had been a keeper of the seawall for most of her adult life. The seawall was a long, low wall of fitted stones that protected the harbour from the open ocean. It had been built by the town's founders many generations ago, and it needed constant tending. Storms loosened the stones. Salt weakened the mortar. Each year, small cracks appeared that would, if left alone, become large ones. The old woman's job was to walk the wall. Every morning, in every season, she walked from one end to the other. She carried a bucket of mortar and a trowel. When she found a crack, she filled it. When she found a loose stone, she reset it. The work was never dramatic. She was not building anything new. She was maintaining what had already been built. One morning, a young man from the town stopped to watch her. "Do you not get tired of this?" he asked. "You do the same thing every day. You feel the same cracks. The cracks come back. The work never ends." The old woman straightened up. She set down her trowel. "Do you see the harbour?" she said. He looked. The harbour was calm. The boats rocked gently. The morning light was on the water. "That is what the wall is for," she said. "The calm on this side. The storm stays on the other side. The wall does not stop the ocean. The ocean is too large for that. The wall simply keeps the harbour safe. And the harbour stays safe because someone walks the wall every morning and fills the cracks before they grow." She picked up her trowel. "I do not get tired of this," she said. "The day I get tired of it is the day the harbour floods." The seawall keeper is the island builder in a different form. Her work is not grand. It is daily. It is the same work, repeated, in all weather, without recognition. She does not build new walls. She tends the one that is already there. And the calm on the harbour side, the peace, the safety, the quiet rocking of the boats, depends entirely on this steady, unglamorous tending. The young man who asked her whether she got tired had made the same mistake most of us make about the inner life. He had assumed the work should have an end, that at some point the wall would be finished, the cracks would stop appearing, and the keeper could rest. The old woman knew better. The cracks would always come. The salt would always work at the mortar. The storms would always test the stones. The work was not building toward a finished state. The work was the ongoing act of care itself. And the care, practiced daily, was what kept the harbor calm. This is the final teaching the Dhammapada offers. That peace is not a single achievement. It is a daily practice. The island is not built once and left alone. It is tended the way the seawall is tended, every morning, by someone who understands that the work is never finished and that the not finishing is not a failure. The not finishing is the practice itself. The Buddha said, by steady effort, care, and self-mastery, the wise build an island that no flood can overwhelm. Steady effort. The quiet, daily, repeated work of filling the cracks before they grow, of carrying one more stone, of walking the wall one more morning. The island we have been building tonight, stone by stone, is already under us. It has been under us the whole time. The mind that shapes experience, the roof that keeps the rain out, the path walked in ordinary shoes, the two wings, the single verse, the kind hand, the lamp, the quarrel set down, the river accepted, the bee's light touch, each one a stone, each one laid with care. The ground is higher than it was when we began. Tonight, the flood is outside. The water moves. It always moves. But the ground you are lying on right now is dry. The work that brought you here, the listening, the breathing, the quiet attention you have given to these hours, has been its own kind of tending. The island holds. Rest on it. The water will do what water does. You are above it now. Let the breath grow slow. Let the body be where it is. Stay in this stillness for a moment, and when you are ready, we will close the night together. And so we come to the end of tonight's journey through the Dhammapada. We have walked through many doorways. The mind that weaves the world, the roof that holds against the rain, the path tested in the body, not held in the head, the two wings that carry a life. One verse, carried through a day, becoming part of the person who carries it. The kind hand on the reins, the lamp lit from within. Hatred ended by love, the river that does not stop, and the peace of moving with it. The bee, leaving each flower whole, and the island, built stone by stone, above the flood. The Dhammapada has been speaking to listeners for 2,500 years. It spoke to monks in the forests of ancient India. It spoke to kings and farmers and children. It speaks tonight to you, in your bed, in your room, wherever you are. The verses we have walked through tonight are older than any building still standing. They have outlived the empires that were powerful when they were first spoken. They have crossed oceans and languages and centuries, passed from one person to the next, carried in memory long before anyone thought to write them down. And they are still here, tonight, in this room, still saying the same quiet things, still pointing at the same peace that was available then and is available now. Whatever you have heard tonight, let it settle in its own time. Some of it may make sense now. Some of it may not make sense until much later. That is how these teachings work. They land where they land, and they grow when they are ready. They have been growing in people for a very long time, and they are in no hurry. Tomorrow the day will begin again. The flood will move. The wind will blow. And somewhere inside you, a small island will be there, steady and dry, because someone, tonight, carried a few more stones. We will be back another night, with another walk through these ancient verses, when you are ready. Until then, may the path be gentle, and may the island always hold firm. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us here at Midnight Monk.